What's up, and welcome to the Cover 2 Recap. I'm BruinSportsReport.com publisher Edward Lewis. This is Ryan Karchi, the OC Register's UCLA beat writer. We're here today at Spalding Field, where UCLA just wrapped up its first spring practice of the season. Ryan, the number one storyline of the day was Torian White, last year's starting left tackle, has been kicked off the team, Jim Moore announced. He declined to elaborate on why, but from your opinion, how is that going to help or hurt this team going forward?
Well, obviously, losing any of that offensive line depth is going to hurt somewhat. It was a position that was not very clear. Even last season, the season before that, looks like they'll be playing some musical chairs again. They won't have Simon Goins for the spring. He's still kind of recovering from his knee surgery that he had. So there's going to be a little bit of mix-ups there. I know today they had Powasi Moala, redshirt freshman at right tackle. He's got the athleticism, I think, to make a big splash here. Caleb Benenoch was playing left tackle. He started most of the year at right tackle last season, so he'll definitely make a big splash. I think, especially with Benenoch, I was pretty impressed with his kind of body transformation. He clearly worked on that in the offseason. Jim Morris said Powasi Moala was one of the most transformed players on the entire team. So I think those two are going to be especially interesting guys to watch. And we also haven't seen any of Malcolm Bunch, the Miami graduate transfer. He's still ironing out some eligibility issues, trying to get in through admissions. We should see him, Jim Morris said maybe later this week. So I think he'll definitely mix things up. There's still a lot to be determined in the offensive line. I think that's probably where most of the position battles are going to be this spring.
I think one of the underrated aspects of that whole storyline of Torian White and him getting kicked off the team is really the zero tolerance policy Mora is putting up right now with his team. You see it with Steve Alford at the Iowa thing, and the biggest headache it's been for him here, even at UCLA, some 15, 20 years later. I mean, the courts and the legal system still hasn't sorted out Torian White's issues, yet Mora says, all right, we're done. We're moving on. I think that's going to be key, setting the tone for the discipline on this team and what his players can and can't do. Moving forward to on-the-field stuff, today some players stood out. In my opinion, Zach Whitley had a great day. Mossy Johnson had a really nice day. In your opinion, who were some of the guys that really showed out on their first day of spring ball?
Well, those two guys especially, in terms of young freshmen, I think they really made themselves known, especially Mossy, which I thought was impressive. We'd heard about Zach Whitley. We heard that he was an athletic freak. Miles Jack told me he was actually bigger than when Miles came in last year, which is saying something. But with Mossy, he made a few great catches, and I know he came in as a defensive back. We didn't really expect him to make that much of a splash, but he did right off the bat. So I think he's definitely going to be someone to watch. Jordan Payton, I think, is kind of an interesting case to watch. Shaq Evans, I know Jim Mora was saying he's interested to see if someone steps up into that kind of leadership role in the wide receiving core. Jordan had a great catch today. He looks a little bit better. He looks like he's in better shape than we've seen him. Looked a little quicker, in my opinion. So I think if anyone's probably the favorite to take over that number one receiving spot, I think Jordan's probably the most consistent, and you might see him, getting a lot more touchdowns this year. I think he'll probably be the team's leading receiver at this point. But obviously a lot to go. We didn't really see much of Devin Lucien this week, but I don't know. I think that's probably about it in terms of players that have stood out.
I thought Thomas Duarte had an underrated day. I mean, he's never going to be the kind of guy that's going to catch 100 balls for 700 yards or whatever, but he had a really nice day. But going back to Zach Whitley, if you had slapped a number 30 on his back, you'd be really hard pressed to say, is that Miles Jack? I mean, the way he was moving sideline to sideline, his athleticism, his length, Jim Moore talked about it. He could play both inside and outside linebacker. I think he's going to have a really nice future here.
I was actually really impressed with Owa Odigizua, the way he kind of stepped in. Obviously, he hasn't taken a snap in over a year. He really stepped in. He said his hips feel great. He had surgery on both of them. He stepped in and he was kind of running those young offensive tackles off the line. So I think, it seems like he's kind of stepped into that defensive end spot that he vacated, a season ago. And I think, obviously Eddie Vanderdoes being out for the spring with a broken foot maybe helps him get a lot more reps, get back into the swing of things. But he's absolutely going to have a big effect on the defense this year.
Now moving forward, it was only day one. We have 14 days left of spring, and then obviously 6 more months till fall camp starts. But what are some of the kind of the issues raised today that you saw that need to be corrected that you're going to be looking for in the next couple weeks, couple months?
Well, I mentioned the offensive line. I think that's probably issue number one at this point. But I also think it's interesting that the first thing Jim Mora brought up when I asked him a similar question was, replacing Anthony Barr, getting that outside linebacker spot ironed out. I know Kenny Orgioki probably looks like the favorite for most of that time. Deion Hollins got some time today. Aaron Wallace will definitely be in the picture. He was out today because of some academic issues. But in terms of getting that pass rush, I think it even goes beyond just Orgioki or Hollins and them. I know Owa mentioned the fact that they're going to move him around a little bit, try to create more pass rush. So it seems like that's one of the main focuses, that you have Anthony Barr, a guy who had 23 sacks over the last 2 seasons. You have to find a way to make up for that production, not necessarily by one guy, but by a committee. I think in terms of a stat that you want to look at, that's one thing that they're definitely going to try to cover this spring. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that outside linebacker spot I think is my number one thing. Talking with Jeff Ulbrich in the offseason, Kenny Orgioki has become his baby now. His new kind of athletic piece of clay to mold, like he did with Anthony Barr and they're doing with Miles Jack. I think that's going to be my kind of number one spot. I think the offensive line, I know there's a lot of concerns there, but I think it'll all sort itself out when injuries and academics and stuff get going. But that's my takeaway from it. That'll do it for us here at UCLA's first day of spring ball. For the rest of the coverage all month long, you can follow him on Twitter at Ryan_Karchi and at OCRegister.com. Follow me on Twitter at EdwardLewisBSR and at BruinSportsport.com. Until the next time, thanks for tuning in to the Cover 2 Recap.